I am incredibly perturbed by this because I put up my book Camille as an ebook and as I think a hardcover yesterday, and I specifically put the price at $24.99, and it's showing as $71.99 on Amazon. I don't know why that would be. I don't know how this works, but it annoys me because, first of all, I don't want my readers to think that I put my book at that price. It's obviously just crazy and ridiculous. But another thing is, if my book is selling at $71.99 and I'm not making any money on my book, who's making that kind of money on my work? You know what I mean? It's like it took me 7 years to write this book. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I'm not saying it's like Pulitzer Prize winning, but it took 7 years to finish this. And so I just get really perturbed because I don't make money on my writing. I don't make money on my writing. And it's like, it's annoying. Why would they do that? You know what I mean? But anyway, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what to say about it. So this is the what do you call it? The look inside. I don't select that, obviously. Amazon does. And, so I think it has like 3 or 4 chapters. So I thought I would read that to you. So, Camille, chapter 1. Place Vendôme, Paris. Camille McAllister Chang stifled a hunger-induced yawn and began to tap her fingers on the desk she was sitting at. "Where's this guy?" she muttered impatiently. "I'm hungry." A young American woman of mixed Asian, Irish, and Berber descent, Camille had been living in Paris about 5 years, having immigrated there to study art and subsequently deciding to settle there after her studies. What else was she supposed to do with her life at that point? She had long since left her father's home in New Jersey. Her mother had relocated to Hong Kong and had remarried after the couple divorced when Camille was only 6 years old, and had been living and working in Chicago when she got the idea to move to Paris. You can call it a quarter-life crisis of sorts. In Paris, she supported herself by teaching English while she practiced her art. Teaching English was not the most lucrative career in the world. She was painfully aware of that. Her Irish father, a successful lawyer in New Jersey, had expressed his dismay on more than a few occasions that she had chosen to throw her education away. He had paid for her university studies at Yale to take up such a lowly profession as teaching English and studying art. But she did not care to return to the U.S. anytime soon, and she certainly was not going to live her life according to her father's rules anymore. She loved her life in Paris. She was starting a new gig at a posh white shoe international law firm on Place Vendôme, and if things worked out, this contract would last a full year. Her job was to keep the lawyers, not to keep the lawyers, to keep the lawyers entertained. Her job was to help the lawyers improve their legal English. All in all, there were 5 attorneys on this assignment. She had already seen 3 for the day. The next guy had a 30-minute module, and there was a woman after him, a partner, also for 30 minutes. After that, she could leave. 1 more hour. It was a lot, but it could have been worse, though it would not be a minute too soon when it was all over, because she was on the verge of collapsing from hunger. "This all fruit and veggie diet is for the birds," she mumbled, getting up to pour herself some coffee in a white porcelain teacup. "I need more carbs." She'd been trying out a new diet for a week that had left her with very little energy. She was already reed thin, just as she preferred to be, but that was not exactly effortless. She had taken after her father and could gain weight quickly if she were not careful, so she had to work at it. But she made a mental note that she would return to her normal diet as soon as she got home. She just absolutely had to have sugar. Camille plopped a fancy-looking sugar cube from Malawi into the cup and stirred brusquely with a shiny silver teaspoon. "At least they're very civilized here," she thought. "Even their spoons are expensive. I just wish they realized that air conditioning has been invented." It was a hot summer day, circa 2015. She was wearing a pretty white lacy camisole under her shirt with a white cotton skirt and black slingbags. For some crazy reason, probably because she had not listened to the weather report, or maybe because of just habit, she was also carrying her trench coat that day and had draped it over her chair. Taking a gulp of her coffee, she walked closer to the window so she could look out on the avenue, the busy and posh Place Vendôme. Parisians of every sartorial stripe, well-dressed salesgirls, construction workers, businessmen, and motorcyclists scurried in every direction. Paris was a very fast city. She was often surprised by just how fast it was. It wasn't that she was not used to fast cities. She had grown up in Hoboken, New Jersey, right next to Manhattan. Prior to moving to Chicago, after her studies at Yale, she had spent almost every weekend in the Big Apple hanging out with her friends. Connecticut and Chicago were lively in their own way, so it was not like she had come from the boonies, but she found the energy of Paris to be different from everywhere she had lived before. Sometimes she felt she could not keep up, like they would run her over. At 35, Camille was not exactly a spring chicken, though she looked and acted at least a decade younger, but she definitely was not a baby, and she definitely felt like Paris was very fast. Just then, there was a firm knock on the conference room door. Quickly gulping down the rest of her coffee, she patted her mouth dry and walked towards the door. "Come in," she said in her most authoritative voice. The door opened, and she was face to face with Monsieur Edouard Lagarde. Chapter 2. "Bonjour, monsieur," said Camille, smiling and extending her right hand for a handshake. "I've been expecting you." "Enchanté," he replied in a heavy French accent, taking her hand. Their eyes locked for an instant. His were a deep greenish brown with a slightly vacant look in them. She could not help but notice how impeccably groomed this man was, especially since it was summer and quite warm. The other attorneys had been dressed quite casually, but Monsieur Lagarde was wearing a navy linen suit, white shirt with cufflinks, and pale blue tie with powder pink stripes. He wasn't very tall, maybe about 5'7", but he nevertheless seemed very powerful. He smelled rich, she thought, and he looked to be rather old, at least 60 in her estimation, almost the same age as her father. It suddenly occurred to her that he seemed to be standing unnecessarily close to her, and she felt a magnetic pull as if she was being sucked into him. It made her shiver. She smiled nervously and with gargantuan effort pulled herself away from him and moved towards the other side of the desk. What could I possibly teach this guy, she wondered. He does not strike me as the type of guy who wants to spend the next half hour talking about phrasal verbs. She smiled at the man again and motioned towards a chair on the other side of the table. "Please," she said, "have a seat." "Merci, mademoiselle," said Monsieur Lagarde in an exaggerated accent. "Can I offer you anything, like some coffee, water, soda?" she asked. He muttered something in French. "Pardon?" she asked, confused. "Evian, s'il vous plaît." "Oh, bien sûr." She walked over to the counter and picked up a bottle of Evian. Monsieur Lagarde found it mesmerizing the way she used her hands. He admired her long, slim fingers as she poured the water. Camille could feel him staring at her hands, and it made her tremble a little bit, which resulted in some of the water spilling on the desk. She handed the glass to him and then poured herself a glass before sitting down and turning her full attention to her new client. She fished out her glasses out of her bag without taking her eyes off the man, affecting her most serious and businesslike expression as she fitted them on her face. Smiling, she said, "I guess we can begin by you telling me a little bit about yourself and what you expect to get from this course." She took a blank sheet of paper and pen to take notes. Her stomach was growling, but the consummate professional, she did not let on. The man began to speak in fairly good English, though with a heavy French accent. He was Edouard Lagarde. He was an equity partner at the firm, and his specialty was international litigation. He had studied at Yale for a semester abroad back in the 1970s, but mostly he had completed his studies in France. This was intriguing because she too had gone to Yale, but she did not disclose this to him. She just nodded and listened to him listened to him speak. He traveled a lot for work all over the world, especially Asia and the US, to countries like Singapore, Indonesia, and India. His English clients were major American heads of corporations such as Google, Microsoft, and Dell, as well as a few billionaires with whom apparently he often socialized. He was 65 years old and had 2 grown kids. He wanted to improve his English conversational skills, although he did not want to spend too much time on grammar and other such mundane matters. While he spoke, Camille wrote furiously. She was also thinking that his English was already nearly flawless, and she had no idea what added value he would get from a course with her. So, specifically, what types of topics would you like to discuss during our conversations? She asked, peering at him over her glasses. Well, before we get into that, why don't you tell me all about you, mademoiselle? Me? Yes, you. Who else would you think I meant? He turned his full body to face her. Camille again felt that magnetic tug, and she gripped the edge of the desk. What a strange sensation, she thought. There was something about this man that unnerved her, an intensity that she had never experienced before. On the one hand, he seemed like a normal guy, but on the other hand, there was something weird about him. She did not know what it was. She tried not to be nervous. What was she to tell him? That she was boring? That there was really nothing to her in her life that would be remotely interesting to him or anyone else for that matter? Well, let's see. I teach, she mumbled. His cell phone mercifully began to ring. Saved by the bell, she muttered. Come on, he said. Oui, je m'excuse, she said, smiling. The man got to his feet. Would you excuse me? I need to take this, he said. Yes, of course. Take your time. He left the room. God, Camille, really articulate, she chided herself, covering her face in her hands, which were clammy and cold. She pressed her hands deeply into her face and let out a huge gasp of air. At that moment, the man returned to the room. Mademoiselle, I'm very sorry, but I must cut short our meeting. Something unexpected with a client. Can we resume this conversation next time? And don't worry, you can charge for the full session. No problem. Yes, of course, monsieur. Thank you. He reached into his pocket and took out his wallet, handing her his business card. Oh, thank you, she said. He extended his hand towards hers. Her hands had never felt so small as when he took her hands into his. He had a very strong handshake, and she found that sexy. He smiled at her mysteriously, then turned and left the room. Oh my God, she gasped when he was out of earshot. What was that? Chapter 3. The cobblestone courtyard below led to a giant door that opened onto Place Vendôme, where the green column Vendôme stood regally in the middle of the octagonal square. Camille walked briskly towards this giant door, eager to get out of the unusually hot Paris sun. The city had been going through a heat wave. She wanted to get to the shade as quickly as possible. The heel of her slingbacks clicked and clacked against the cobblestones with every step. Her long legs, which were accentuated by slim, well-shaped calves, were on full display in her short, white skirt. Her trench coat was draped across her right arm. Monsieur Lagarde certainly appreciated the view from the window of his office on the 4th floor, where he was enjoying a few puffs from his cigarette. He watched until the last moment that the bottom of her talon disappeared through the giant courtyard door that opened onto the square. Camille, meanwhile, was feeling stressed by this gnawing hunger. Her first objective was to find a place to have some lunch. After that, she had to get to her flat, where a slew of headaches awaited. She looked across the street at the green colonne de Vendôme, which loomed in the distance. Where could she get a quick bite? She looked in every direction and saw no possibilities which suited her modest budget in the Poche Noire. Just ahead, the Ritz Hotel was undergoing construction. Next door, Mannequin in Coco Chanel's flagship store seemed to mock her pennilessness. Then there was Dior, Van Cleef and Arpels, Bulgari, Louis Vuitton, Fred. This was no place for a struggling English teacher to find a good lunch. She hurried along the Rue de la Paix towards Opera. She knew there were tons of affordable cafes along Rue du 4 Septembre, which was on her way home. Just as she was about to cross the street, the heel of her